Greetings, everyone. Welcome to this week's Green Eggs and BAM. This is part of our series of thought-provoking sustainability discussions with national thought leaders as we explore how to create the next new normal, a world that is just, thriving, and resilient. I'm Kim Morrow, Director of Climate Planning and Resilience here at Verdis Group in our Lincoln, Nebraska office. We are a sustainability consulting firm that guides organizations to serve a thriving and resilient world. Our special guest today is Sandra Washington. I got to know Sandra last year as she served on the Climate Resilience Task Force here in Lincoln. This task force was a key component in helping to create the city's first ever climate action plan, a draft of which will be released by the mayor this month. Sandra is currently a city councilperson at large for Lincoln and a longtime parks professional. Sandra worked with the National Park Service for nearly 25 years, retiring in 2014 as the Association Regional Director for the Midwest region. She currently serves on the boards of the Nebraska Trails Foundation and the National Parks Conservation Association. Originally from Columbus, Ohio, she has lived in Lincoln since 1990. Sandra, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you very much, Kim. It's my pleasure to take a part in Green Eggs and BAM, which I think is the most creative title for a conference that I've attended in the last 10 years.
Well, thank you. We wanted to grab attention, and I suppose we did. Well, I have a couple of questions here. As you know, this series is looking deeply at how we are creating together not a new normal, but a next normal coming out of the pandemic, as this experience of 2020 has radically shifted so many things for so many of us. And like most crucible moments, it brings with it both insight as well as difficulties and a lot of new learning that can come out of the struggles that we have faced. And so I wanted to start by just asking you, how has your work changed during the pandemic?
Well, you know, being a council person, the work is important. Sometimes it can be mundane. I know that most folks don't look at budget setting as terribly exciting, but budget is how we put our policies into action, how we put our values out there. And I thought that would be the most difficult part of the job. I've been in this position now for just about a year and a half. But that hasn't been the most challenging or difficult part of the job. Frankly, the budget was a nice break from the intensity of having to shift things around, not just money, but really shift priorities. Public health and safety, of course, being front and center. And then how do you protect the economy? How do you bolster support? How do you take care of business owners? And besides taking care of the health of residents, how do you take care of businesses? And then the social justice, civil unrest that really became the story this summer. I never thought that I would see it in my lifetime become so prevalent, so part of mainstream recognition that there was a problem in this country. And that has, it's good that it's front and center. It's good that people are paying attention. It's exhausting.
Mm-hmm. Can you say a little bit more about what it's been like for you as a person of color, as a leader in our community, to be called upon to have some of these conversations?
I am really glad that I have reached a ripe old age and maturity. I'm not actually old, but I'm awfully glad that I am not as young as I used to be. I'm not sure I would have had the fortitude to stand with this. It takes a lot of patience, not just with others, also with myself. And it takes, and it really does take an attitude of forgiveness. And not that there's anyone that I have to specifically forgive, but just a place of grace, recognizing that all of us are, wherever we are in this journey of awareness, I don't hold a grudge against any person individually for where they are. Um, I may wish the world to be more just than it is today, but I'm not trying to blame anyone. I blame no one for where we are today. Um, but the amount of energy it takes to stay completely present with people and to remain open to their understanding wherever it is takes a lot of energy. And my ears are open much more than my mouth, and that is my goal. I would rather hear where people are. I'd rather ask a question and then sit and wait for the answer or the response from folks. I'm a conservationist. I studied field ecology, all of the sciences. I thought I would be a ranger for the rest of my life. I have degrees in planning, but I really thought I would be a ranger. And my goal when I was in high school was to be a fire spotter, because that would give me solitude, it would give me adventure, and it would put me smack dab in the middle of the resources that I love so much. And I am much more people focused than I ever realized I would be. And I'm glad for all of the evolution in my career that led me from wanting to spend all my time in the woods to wanting to spend all my time building community.
Wow, that's beautiful. Well, that's a great segue to our next question. So, as we're thinking about the pandemic and the climate crisis, what lessons do you think we are learning collectively that can be applied to our response to the climate crisis?
I think all of us are learning to live in gray, that things are not one thing or the other. I think that makes us more flexible, more available to shift our personal priorities or the ways that we do things. I think it's making us more understanding potentially and more forgiving of circumstance. When we're all in something together, it brings a community together. So we're all experiencing this pandemic in the same way as a year ago, a little over a year ago, many of us were all experiencing those devastating spring storms that resulted in flooding in so much of our area. And though there are people in Lincoln proper who didn't have the flooding, we all, experienced those storms. And then when our water source was threatened and all of us had to shut down as much water use as we typically do, it brought us again into that place of we are in this together and we're going to work through this together. So I think that COVID has made us come together and recognize that we're a community that needs to work together if we're going to get through something. I also think it's unleashed creativity.
It's unleashed creativity. And what are some examples of that you've seen?
Well, just, our response to the pandemic. I mean, our ability to say, okay, wait a second, we can do this as a community. And whether it's the Lincoln Community Foundation saying, what we're going to do now is we're going to have a COVID fund and we're going to raise money specifically so that we can find more ways to distribute food, resources and diapers. I don't know that I paid as much attention. I pay attention to food scarcity. I'm not sure I've ever paid attention to diaper scarcity and the criticalness of diapers until this pandemic. And now all of us are throwing diapers in our shopping carts so that we can make donations of diapers as well as foodstuffs. There's a gentleman in this near South neighborhood who's opened up free pantries that look like the mini free libraries. It started with one near his house and it's morphed and there's a dozen of them and there are more people asking for free pantries. And I am amazed, even after we have all of those other ways to distribute food resources to folks. This is the block by block, neighbor helping neighbor with a little bit of anonymity. So people are filling up these pantries without the initiator having to go around and fill up all the pantries. He checks, but people are donating foodstuffs and people are taking what they need. They're not emptying them out unless that's what they need. They take what they need. And I just think that's another creative way to say we're going to help each other. And the fact that we all are doing things by Zoom, I mean, I think it really shows our creativity here.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, I think all of these things together has forced us to look at how we might do something in a different way.
Mm-hmm. That's fantastic. I'm really noticing that what you're highlighting is things like grace, forgiveness, creativity, community. You're really like noticing these kind of soft connections that make us stronger as a community. Like you haven't said anything about technology solutions or greenhouse gas emissions or anything like that. And I think you're making such an important point in that way. It's so much of our resilience to the changing climate is about our connection to each other. So
Yeah.
that leads into my next question. And you may continue on the same kind of community-based track or you may expand, but how do you think we can leverage the pandemic to accelerate sustainability and address the climate crisis?
Oh, I think that's an excellent question. I think that what we as a city need to do is really look at diversifying almost everything. That we need to remind ourselves and give ourselves solutions to problems that multiple solutions, so that we don't always assume that the right solution is the solution we've done before, or we give ourselves maybe in bus schedules. So public transit, we have a route. Everyone goes, I know what the routes are. I know what time the buses come. But instead of that, I mean, with this pandemic, we immediately realized the ridership was dropping because people were working at home and the university shut down for the most part. And so they took buses off, they took routes offline. Now there are some people who still needed to get downtown, and they just basically picked up another route and said, this route is now going to detour just to pick up a group of people who live in this area who were regularly using a different route. And the people were able to like maintain public transit, and people who still needed to get to work were still getting to work. Even though ridership fell off and we dropped a couple of routes, and then we condensed the schedule because we realized that we didn't have people working, needing the buses as late into the evening. And then as things started to pick up again, the routes started to come back on, and the time of the buses started to lengthen out a little bit more normal. But what I can envision going forward is that we're going to be a much more nimble organization in our public transit. Yes, we're going to have lots of routes, but we're going to be able to shift them very quickly.
So you're saying that our ability to hold on to this kind of adaptability that we practiced during the pandemic is something that we should really take ownership of and continue to practice going forward?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There is not going to be one solution to any problem. And I think it's more obvious now to us. And I think we should always keep ourselves open to using 2 or 3 different solutions to any problem.
Yeah.
So I think the flexibility, our ability to shift, to pivot quickly to other ways. I am hopeful that one of the lessons that we learn is being self-sufficient. I hope that self-sufficiency is increased. I noticed a lot more people are gardening this year than gardened in the past, and I don't know how much of it is boredom and how much of it is wanting to feel a little bit more secure that no matter what, I know that I'm growing some of my food. I realize a lot of gardeners are doing the ornamental and landscaping because we're at home. We want to make our spaces as beautiful and as restful as we possibly can. But I want to really think about how we can manage food security a little bit more locally.
Yeah, that's a great point, and the Climate Action Plan discusses that too. So hopefully we'll be having a lot more discussions about that in our community in the coming months. But thinking about all of the opportunities and strategies that are out there for co-creating a next normal that is just, resilient, and thriving, what do you think we should be prioritizing?
I think we need to prioritize livability. Lincoln is a really great community, and I like that in many ways it feels like a small town.
Mm-hmm.
A small town with 300,000 people in it,
Mm-hmm.
but it has that close community feel, which I really appreciate. But I also think that we need to be taking a look at that and finding ways to make our city more livable for each other and for new residents. And specifically, we need affordable housing.
Mm.
We need affordable housing at almost every price point, every income level, but we don't have enough workers in our community. And even though this pandemic showed us where our economy rests so heavily on the service workers, and service workers are frontline workers, and yet many of their jobs have shifted, have disappeared, have gone on hiatus for months on end. We need to still find ways to bring jobs in that are stable jobs, that are jobs that can withstand a pandemic or other large crises. And we need to find housing for them. If people don't have good jobs and decent housing, then they won't live in Lincoln. And I want people to want to live in Lincoln. And once we get past a job, a place to live, and food security, we have so much that we could do. And so it may not be the sexiest thing to be thinking about, but I really want us to be thinking about affordable housing, food security, a way to get past the scarcity mentality of food, and good, solid jobs that are capable of withstanding massive changes and emergencies.
I think
And
that's
more resilient. I mean, not more, more self-sufficient. That means finding industries that work in Lincoln, that produce what we need in Lincoln, as well as produce what people need in other places. But I want us to take care of ourselves.
Yeah, that's great. And that was one of the central themes that came up in the climate action planning process. I think a lot of us maybe didn't see beforehand how much our economic health as a community relates to our climate resilience health. And all those things that you're talking about are just spot on. I mean, in order to be a resilient community of the future, we need to have a resilient economy. Because if you don't have a resilient economy, then people leave, people can't survive, people can't recover from disasters like you're saying. And so making sure we have a strong economy and an economy that is aligned with the climate of the future is one of the main points that we need to work on as a community.
Yeah, and it seems so amazing that our world is shifting to, and I don't think it's going to return completely, but our world is shifting to outdoor a little bit more, not just for, I loved last week. So, all right, shiny objects. So last week, Lincoln became the bicycle champion city. That we, and this is like the 5th or 6th time it's been awarded this award. I mean, we will ride our bikes for miles. I mean, I cannot believe how many miles Lincoln bicyclers logged this last spring and summer. It's amazing. Almost 500,000 miles, like 403,000 or something. Amazing. But we're also socializing outdoors in less rigorous ways. And as we start to redevelop the O Street streetscape, and we look at South Haymarket, and we look at other places, other places in town, those are the two that just pop up to me right now. I think about how we need to organize our landscapes, park spaces, small pocket parks, linear spaces, to allow for social distancing, but still a feeling of being in an enclave, so that we have this feeling of, hey, we're out in public, we're safely distanced from each other, but we're still able to interact and have an intimate experience, whether or not we're having lunch together out of doors, because we carried our food away from the indoor restaurant, or we're picnicking or something. So as I think about how much time I've spent on my neighbors' driveways, we're now socializing on driveways instead of in people's family rooms. I think about how we need to design public space and park space in a way that helps us support that kind of interaction.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's going to change. And then outdoor dining.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I mean, I'm going to eat outdoors in November.
Yeah. Yeah, all of a sudden Lincoln's looking a lot more like Paris, right?
A little bit. And it won't necessarily be like super comfortable. No one's going to say, I love eating outdoors at 40 degrees. But you know what? I am going to figure this out.
Yeah, that's what coats are for. So thinking about some of these awesome strategies that you've named, like more effective outdoor social spaces, stronger economy, better jobs, more affordable housing, more locally resilient food systems. What do you think it's going to take to make these a reality?
I think it's going to take leadership. I think that civic leaders, whether they're in government or not-for-profits, just need to stand up and say, this is what's important to us. This is what we're going to focus ourselves on. I think that the business community needs to, I mean, we need business leaders to stand up and do the same. But I think their creativity needs to be toward trying to find that economic resiliency, and then creating the model that says, you know what, we can support this kind of these kinds of jobs. And if that means people want to eat or dine outdoors, or if it means inside of our factory spaces, that we need to create work lines that allow us to do contact tracing should we ever need to do this again. But we have work teams that are consistent with each other, so that groups of people are working with each other. Not only does it maybe help camaraderie in the factory or efficiency on the line, but it also makes it possible to contact trace and know who's in contact with who. I mean, cubicle work situations are going to change. I mean, redesigning office space so that people, when they're in the office, can be productive and collaborative, but not cross-contaminating each other. Right. And I think that there is certainly a lot more people are working at home, but I really want there to be serious conversations about what jobs work at home and which jobs will never work at home. And then making certain that we create quality environments and support systems for people who don't have the luxury to work at home.
That sounds great. Well, Sandra, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today. We really appreciate your service to the Lincoln community and really appreciate all that you're shouldering to make our community a better place. And I love hearing your ideas for how we can become an even more creative, connected, and resilient community. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Kim, and thank you, Verdis. I really appreciate this.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.